Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something that no one has dared to do for over 400 years. Lift the veil on the darkest secrets of Queen Elizabeth I and the Tudor dynasty. Imagine we're standing before the heavy stone doors of Westminster Abbey, where the glory of history is just a thin veneer. Behind those doors, a rotting coffin is exuding the stench of power, of decay, and of buried secrets. What we're about to explore isn't the brilliant pages of history, but the raw, gruesome truth lying inside that coffin where the great Virgin Queen ultimately became a stinking corpse bomb. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Please share in the comments below where you're watching from and what time it is where you live. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Night fell, and when the very last candle in the White Palace guttered out, the hall fell into an uncanny silence broken only by the whistle of wind through the window frames and the laboured sighs of the lone candle stub still smouldering. Upon the icy stone slab, a dark void revealed the silhouette of Queen Elizabeth I's corpse, lying in patient stillness as though awaiting some inscrutable fate. The white bile of her frozen body now swelled, drifting gently like the feeble breath of a weary soul, in the dim space heavy with the scent of beeswax and lingering candle smoke. Nearly 4 centuries had passed, yet her mummy slept soundlessly beneath the unfeeling stone, as though submerged in history's long dream, where the radiance of England's golden age shrouded countless secrets. Elizabeth Tudor, formerly known as Gloriana, a name honouring her heroic spirit and indomitable beauty, ascended the throne at the age of 18, stepping into the palace as if crossing the threshold between life and death. The throne upon which she sat was no less than an electric chair bristling with spikes. From rebel forces poised to storm the tunnels beneath the castle, to foreign plots that slipped poison cups into royal goblets, every danger lurked in the castle's shadows. Even in the heart of the sumptuous palace, she had to watch every look from her own kin, for rumours of her cousin Mary's execution echoed through the halls, leaving a stain of injustice no curse could wash away. And yet, Elizabeth would not bow to any threat. She not only wielded the power of womanhood with finesse, but also shone as a master strategist. When the Spanish Armada surged toward England like a tempest, intent on erasing her realm from the map, she enacted the tactic of small ships, swift strikes, swift withdrawals, a nimble maneuver exploiting the sea's narrow channels. On decks glazed with sea salt and billowing cannon smoke, the Tudor standard fluttered defiantly, the briny wind filling the sailors' lungs and igniting an unyielding resolve. The thunder of cannon fire echoed across the channel, the wind howled along the gunwales, and the flash of artillery painted a triumphant tableau. Those moments sowed the seeds of the Golden Age. Shakespeare began penning immortal plays, scholars flourished in science and astronomy, and the voyages of Raleigh and Drake cast England's flag upon distant horizons. Yet the inexorable law of birth, aging, illness, and death spares no one, not even a monarch. When Elizabeth's final breath slipped away, that instant saw royal prestige shatter. She ceased to be the untouchable emblem of power, and became nothing more than a cold corpse, in need of proper embalming to avert the catastrophe of the bursting body. Her last plea reverberated through the dim chamber. "Do not touch my body. Let me stand before God whole." But the harsh customs of the Middle Ages, placing precedence on ritual and order above all supplications, ignored her words. Her body was carried to the embalming chamber for the grim rite. Icy blades sliced through flesh, organs were removed and replaced with spices, cloves pungent and sharp, cinnamon warm and earthy, myrrh faintly fragrant in an effort to stifle the stench of death and prevent the corpse from ballooning during the funeral. In the flickering candlelight, the rasp of steel against tissue sounded like a macabre dirge, accompanied by the laboured breathing of a soul on the brink. This gruesome procedure was not enacted out of reverence but from a public safety imperative, transforming a solemn rite into a nightmarish display of medical horror. At last, iron needles stitched the wounds closed, beeswax sealed every suture, and the crimson velvet embroidered with Tudor roses was drawn over the mummy, an almost artistic execution of medical theatre that chilled the soul. Even in death, that red velvet, an icon of royal might, clung desperately to lifeless flesh, as if reminding all who beheld it that supreme power, too, can only borrow cloth and metal to stave off the fading breath of time. And once the embalming was complete, one truth remained undeniable: glory must pass, and only the absolute solitude of death endures. And now, dear friends, hold on to your wakefulness, even if my voice lulls you to sleep, because at this very moment we shall together pry open the rotting crimson velvet and discover what lies hidden within the coffin. After the embalming ritual was completed, the heavy lead coffin was placed inside a gilded oak outer shell, swathed in deep crimson velvet. Two coffins, lead on the inside and oak on the outside, formed the most advanced engineering marvel of their age, designed explicitly to prevent the Queen's corpse from rupturing and releasing noxious gases. Long iron nails hooked the lead lining in place, their rusted heads glinting dully in the lamplight. Steel needles bore the weight of the velvet drapery, their points still embedded in the stiff fabric. Silken cords, woven from threads finer than a spider's web, crisscrossed over every seam, an invisible net pinning Elizabeth's remains against the relentless pressure of decay. On the River Thames, the royal funeral barge set out beneath a sky of slate. The vessel, its hull, carved with graceful fleur-de-lis and Tudor roses, bore the double coffin between two banks lined by silent mourners. As the barge drifted onward, the river's currents stirred aromatic breaths from beneath. Warm cinnamon and pungent cloves mixed uneasily with the brackish stench of stagnant water. Women in sombre gowns pressed handkerchiefs to their faces. Men in velvet and lace turned away, eyes watering at the sharp tang rising from the underbelly of the barge. The funeral trumpet sounded its first lament long, wavering notes that echoed beneath stone bridges and along the eaves of shuttered houses, as though the kingdom itself wept in unison. Thousands from dukes and earls to common boatmen stood shoulder to shoulder on the embankments, heads bowed, gazes fixed on that final vestige of Tudor authority gliding through mist and river haze. When the barge reached Westminster Abbey, the coffin was transferred into the underground chambers of the medieval church. Flickering candles cast ghostly light upon vaulted arches, carving long shadows across the damp stone walls. The massive oak door, darkened by centuries of soot and incense, creaked shut behind the pallbearers, sealing off the splendor of the nave above and surrendering the world to the musty hush of the crypt. Within that subterranean chamber, the remnants of the river funeral lay scattered across the floor. Fragments of crimson velvet, frayed and discolored, dry cinnamon husks bleached by candlelight, rusty fragments of surgical instruments mingled with a fine, dust-like ash. These mementos drifted in the stale air, vestiges of a ceremony both grand and grotesque. Beneath the weight of countless seasons, the Queen's remains continued their silent struggle with time. The oak shell, once polished smooth, softened into brittle splinters that snapped under the faintest touch. The velvet, once a sumptuous mantle of regal red, bloomed with irregular patches of greenish mould, spreading like a living tapestry of decay. The lead lining, engineered to contain festering gases, buckled and warped under the ceaseless push from within, its neatly crafted seams twisted into grotesque ridges. Shards of corroded nails fell to the flagstones with muted clinks, each tiny metallic echo a testament to years of chemical warfare waged by the body's own decomposition. Scattered across the cold floor of the crypt, the fragile remains of Tudor embroidery lay tattered in silent testimony. Each rose of York, blended with a rose of Lancaster, a symbol of dynastic reconciliation intended to unite warring houses, now existed as nothing more than loose threads, clinging desperately to loose shrouds. Those interwoven petals had once comforted a queen determined to heal the wounds of civil strife. Now they whispered a final lament from history, that even the grandest symbols of unity and power can be undone by the inexorable march of time. Above ground, sunlight filtered through stained glass windows painted in jewel tones, illuminating the nave with rainbow halos. Choirs filled the air with soaring hymns, and the faint rumble of carriage wheels echoed distantly against cobbled streets. None of this brightness penetrated the crypt below. There, amid dripping stone and tangled roots of ivy creeping through cracks, the embalmment gases continued their quiet revolt, pushing, cracking, and hissing in soft bursts against metal and fabric. Like a slow, rattling sigh, these gases slipped through hidden seams and ventilation channels, tickling the silence with unreconciled life. Throughout the centuries, a handful of intrepid explorers and reluctant maintenance keepers have ventured into that forsaken undercroft. They recount stories of flickering lantern beams revealing drifting tatters of scarlet cloth, as if the Queen's funeral mantle had burst into spectral flames before their eyes. They speak of hearing a low, rhythmic murmur like distant waves lapping hollow wood emanating from the lead coffin itself. Lantern light dancing across the warped metal surfaces creates the illusion of movement, as though the coffin were straining against its bonds, attempting to shatter free and release its fetid cargo into the vaulted gloom. And so, deep beneath the Abbey's soaring spires and carved angels, the physical remains of Queen Elizabeth I wage their final contest with entropy. Each fragment of velvet, each shard of oak, each scrap of rusted iron is a battleground in the silent war between human artifice and nature's reclaiming force. Visitors above may marvel at stately tombs and carved effigies, but hidden steps away lies a realm of whispered sighs and shifting shadows, where the only certainty remains: nothing endures but death itself. In that buried chamber, the Queen's mummy lies bound by thread and metal, a relic of glory turned testament to mortality. It is a final paradox. The very engineering designed to preserve her has instead illuminated the futility of all preservation. For however modern the craftsmanship, however skillful the ritual, time will always slip through the finest defences, leaving only the lonely echo of decay. And so, as the Abbey stands resplendent under heaven's light, remember that below its polished floors and hallowed halls lies a secret kingdom of rot, and remembrance a quiet, unending requiem for a queen who once ruled an empire, now reduced to dust and echoing gas, constantly reminding us that in the end, all power yields to the grave. In the early 19th century, the Reverend Arthur Stanley was granted the rare privilege of venturing into the royal tombs beneath Westminster Abbey. With each heavy footfall echoing off damp stone, he pressed forward through a labyrinth of narrow corridors, his trembling hand gripping an oil lamp whose flickering glow danced across moss-coated walls. The air was thick with moisture, cold enough to seep into his bones, and the distant drip of water marked time in a dirge-like cadence. As he rounded a bend, the corridor opened into the grand crypt where generations of monarchs lay entombed. There, at last, he found the sarcophagus of Queen Elizabeth I. Stanley approached the oak outer coffin with reverence and dread. He set his lamp upon a low plinth, its flame quivering, then removed the casting cloth to reveal the worn exterior. With bare fingers, he lightly probed the wood. Under his touch, brittle fragments splintered away like dry leaves, exposing the dark velvet beneath. The fabric was threadbare, mottled with greenish and yellowish patches where mould had claimed its territory. His breath caught as he glimpsed, through a narrow slit in the shell, the lead lining that had been fashioned to hold the Queen's remains. Those once sleek metal panels were now grotesquely warped, etched with hairline fissures that resembled the cracking skin of a long-forgotten corpse. From within, pockets of fetid air seemed eager to escape, pressing outward against the brittle constraints in a silent revolt. A shiver ran down Stanley's spine. He lifted his lamp closer, the heat revealing dust motes swirling in the stale air. Cinnamon husks, remnants of the embalming spices, lay scattered like burnt offerings on the flagstones. Their once warm aroma mingled uneasily with the dank, earthy stench of decay. This strange bouquet was a final testament to the Queen's desperate bid to stave off the corrosion of flesh, a moment of control wrested from the inexorable tide of time. And yet, in that dank chamber, all such efforts felt pitifully inadequate. Stanley bowed his head in silent prayer, offering a blessing for the sovereign whose body still wrestled with death's slow advance. Then, with deliberate steps, he withdrew his hand and retreated, leaving Elizabeth and her terrible secret sealed once more in the eternal darkness. The lamp's glow faded behind him as he closed the heavy door, and the crypt resumed its hush, a muted world of shadow and damp, of dust and brittle wood. Legend held that if the coffin were ever to burst open, the residual gases, though long diminished, might ignite like a biological bomb, sending a plume of pestilence into the unsuspecting crowd gathered above. That rumour, half remembered by keepers and pilgrims, fueled both fascination and fear. Many who came to admire the grandeur of Elizabeth Regina's effigy above had no inkling of the perils lying just a few paces below. They stood before the alabaster slab inscribed with royal titles, marvelled at the intricate bas-reliefs, and admired the soaring Gothic vaults oblivious to the weight of infected air, waiting to erupt from the unseen depths. Most visitors halted on the gallery level, their eyes tracing the elegant curves of quatrefoil tracery and the etched inscriptions of Tudor lineage. They paused to read the Latin epitaph and to photograph the polished marble under shafts of sunlight. Some whispered polite reflections on the Queen's statesmanship, her defeat of the Spanish Armada, her patronage of the arts. Others, more devout, murmured prayers for her soul before moving on, eager to explore other treasures of the abbey, the tombs of poets, the altar screens, the stained glass windows that told biblical tales in vivid colour. Yet only a handful ventured down the narrow stairs that led toward Stanley's crypt. Guided tours, introduced only in recent decades, brought small groups into partial view of the subterranean vaults. Participants donned helmets and carried flashlights, their voices hushed as they descended into gloom. There they glimpsed damp stone expanses, channels through which irrigation water had once trickled. They saw, half covered by muck and moss, fragments of Norman-era tiles, remnants of earlier burials. But the central feature remained the double coffin of the Virgin Queen, its silence louder than any chant, its decay more resonant than any farewell trumpet. In that cramped chamber, the interplay of light and dark seemed almost alive. Flickering beams from modern electric torches revealed the lead's distorted surface, the velvet's mottled decay, and the oak's brittle fracture. There was no echo of human presence, only the slow drip of moisture and the subtle movement of air as spores drifted in currents unseen. The combined effect evoked a dreamlike state, a suspended moment between life and death, memory and oblivion. Each visitor felt, subconsciously, the pull of centuries, a whisper that urged contemplation of mortality in the face of architectural and political grandeur. Those who emerged from the crypt often carried a curious hush about them. Some returned to the sunlight, blinking against the brightness of the abbey's nave, wondering if they had imagined the subtle hiss of escaping air or the faint glimmer of rust on a nail. Others stood longer beneath the rose windows, meditating on the paradox of a tomb more alive with decay than any living organism could ever be. And all left with the unspoken recognition that what they had witnessed was more than a historical curiosity. It was a reminder of the fragile line between pomp and dust. Even now, the crypt remains sealed to all but a chosen few. The abbey's custodians guard its silence as carefully as they guard the music of its organ and the chants of its choirs. They maintain the humidity controls, inspect the lead seams, and monitor the microclimate to forestall any sudden release of the gases within. For them, the coffin of Elizabeth I is not just a relic, but a living challenge to their craft. A perpetual struggle to hold back the forces of decomposition that have claimed countless lesser tombs throughout history. And so the crypt endures a hidden realm of quiet horrors and hushed reverence. Above, Westminster Abbey stands as a monument to faith, power, and artistry. Below, in the shadows, lies a testament to time's supremacy over all earthly ambitions. In the early 19th century, Arthur Stanley risked his peace of mind to glimpse that hidden world. Today, even with modern technology, the chamber still demands respect, a realm where the only constant is decay, and the only solace lies in the knowledge that, for all our ingenuity, nothing can outlast the silent triumph of entropy. The contrast between the sunlit grandeur above and the shrouded gloom below creates a surreal illusion, as though two worlds occupy the same stone, but never truly meet. In the nave, the polished marble floor gleams beneath shafts of stained glass light. Choirs swell in a soft chorus, and organ's deep chords reverberate from the vaulted ceiling, accompanied by whispered prayers that seem to chase away every shadow. Here, the very air carries a sense of uplift, of celestial promise, as though each note might banish darkness forever. Yet only a few shallow steps descend from this sanctuary, and the atmosphere shifts as though the world has turned inside out. Candlelight and song are replaced by an uncanny hush, pierced only by the drip of water falling from unseen crevices. The air grows colder with each footfall, carrying a damp weight that presses against the skin. In the crypt's narrow corridors, the wind sighs through cracks in the stone, a sound as fragile as a spider's breath, echoing the silent lament of the entombed. It is a world stripped of ceremony, a place where sound itself seems to huddle in corners, reluctant to intrude. Beneath the abbey's lofty arches, visitors pause at the top of the steps, transfixed by the choir's final refrain, only to step down into a realm of dripping darkness. Velvet tatters lie scattered across the flagstones, reminders of the once splendid funeral drapery that cloaked the monarch's remains. Each scrap of fabric, now stiff and crumbly, resembles a fading memory of a ceremony long past. Iron hooks that once pinned those curtains in place protrude from damp walls like skeletal fingers. The echo of footsteps on stone mingles with the distant drip of moisture, a dissonant duet that seems to mock the music above. Here and there, other coffins slumber in dusty niches, their carvings worn by centuries of neglect. Some have collapsed inward, reduced to shapeless wood and corroded nails, exhaling a stench so pungent that even the hardiest visitors dare not linger. These forsaken tombs tell of lesser nobles and forgotten prelates, their names lost to time, their bones mingled with mortar and dust. Yet even these ruins appear more resolute in decay than Elizabeth's own double coffin, which, though engineered to perfection, cannot escape the relentless assault from within. Arthur Stanley, recounting his own nocturnal explorations, spoke of the lead casing's fissures, hairline cracks that spread like broken glass across the metal's surface. He described how the slightest tremor of air would cause fragments of the lining to flake away, leaving minute slivers of metal glinting in his lantern's glow. Those fracture lines, he said, resembled tears in a once proud banner, symbolizing the final capitulation of power against time's unyielding passage. Yet for all the horror these signs inspired, they also prompted a certain awe. If the body could rot and the coffin itself warp, then surely only the Queen's memory could transcend such ruin. And indeed, that memory thrives beyond the moisture-choked air. Above the crypt, her portrait hangs in gilded frames. Alabaster skin under honeyed curls, eyes steady with resolve. In libraries, pages bearing her signature rest behind glass, each stroke of her pen a testament to governance and grace. On stage and screen, her life is reenacted in incandescent performances, ensuring that even as her flesh decays, her spirit remains vivid. Back in the crypt, that vision survives in the threadbare remains of Tudor roses embroidered on her mantle, each tattered petal, a fragment of narrative, a line of text in the unwritten poem of history. Visitors who glimpse those faded roses feel a jolt of recognition. These remnant threads, though brittle, assert the survival of beauty amid entropy. They remind us that legacy is not bound by flesh but carried in human endeavour. So long as someone recalls Elizabeth's name, the tears in her coffin's lining will matter less than the unity she strove to maintain between York and Lancaster, between church and state, between past and future. As one wanders deeper into these corridors, the hush grows heavier, the corridors narrower. The stone underfoot is slick with moisture. The air resonates with the memory of lamentations unrecorded. Each step is a meditation on mortality, carried out in the company of dust and shadow. There is no guide here, no organist to sustain hope, only the quiet drama of coils of rope and bundles of linen, each a desperate attempt to hold back total dissolution. Yet amid the dripping walls and rusted nails, a strange peace can be found. The crypt's silence demands a slow, introspective pace, urging the mind to drift along with the trailing echo of every footstep. In that lull, one contemplates the fragility of all things mortal, how crowns tarnish, how banners droop, how even lead can be gouged by the push of rotting flesh. Eventually, the narrow passage opens into a larger chamber, dimly lit by a single slit of light from above. Here, the Queen's double coffin rests in final repose, encircled by the remnants of a time when power was both absolute and fragile. The velvet is worn, the oak splintered, the lead dented, but even in this state of advanced decay, the tomb exerts a solemn majesty. It stands as a silent sentinel, guarding not only the earthbound remains of a legendary sovereign, but also the enduring contradiction of human achievement and the inevitability of decline. In these moments, one perceives that Westminster Abbey is more than the sum of its soaring spires and carved stone. It is a living palimpsest, where layers of hope and horror coexist. Above ground, sunlight gilds sacred spaces. Below, damp stones cradle the final protestations of dust. This duality, a sacred refuge above, a realm of shadows below, imbues the abbey with a singular power. It reminds every visitor, whether clad in silk or wielding a simple lamp, that even the grandest human designs admit a shadowed counterpart, where the faintest drip of water and the softest sigh of air become the truest testament to the passage of time. And so, in the hush between him and hollow, the crypt whispers its endless lament, that though power may rise in brilliant display, though artistry may soar in vaulted stone. All legacies return to silence beneath the weight of years, leaving only memory tender, tenacious, and entirely insubstantial hovering between light and dark. At the end of their pilgrimage, the visitors clambered back up to the abbey's main level, drawn once more into the warm embrace of marble aisles, soaring vaults, and the familiar comforts of hymn and organ accompaniment. They mingled amid shafts of sunlight that danced through stained-glass windows, pausing to admire carved effigies of kings and poets, exchanging polite remarks about architectural details and storied relics. Not a soul suspected that directly beneath their feet, hidden under layers of cold stone, the corpse of Queen Elizabeth I continued its silent struggle with time, its embalmment gases writhing in lead confines, its velvet shroud succumbing ever more to mould's slow conquest. Westminster Abbey today draws millions of pilgrims each year, yet only a handful of the truly curious dare slip down the secret staircases into that hidden world to confront the astonishing truth. Stories of Elizabeth's mummy, though concealed from public view, have grown into whispered legend. The lead coffin swelling like a taut balloon on the verge of explosion, the faint waft of clove and cinnamon piercing the crypt's dank air, mingling with the stench of putrefaction in a heady, unsettling perfume. These rumours, half believed yet persistently recounted, have made the abbey seem at once holy and haunted, a place where divine worship and mortal horror intersect in unique and inexplicable ways. Pilgrims leaving the main doors speak in hushed awe of the abbey's spiritual majesty. A select few depart with wide eyes and racing hearts, forever changed by the knowledge of what lies beneath. In that frigid undercroft, all that remains visible to the rare explorers are the remnants of decayed velvet lining and warped lead panels, the evidence of centuries of entropy at work. Yet contrarily, the Queen's story, her triumph over the Spanish Armada, her deft diplomatic balancing act with competing European powers, the flourishing of arts and sciences under her generous patronage, resounds with undiminished clarity in history books, musical compositions, and cinematic portrayals. Far from being a forgotten mummy, Elizabeth Regina has become an eternal icon of regal authority, intellectual prowess, and legendary beauty, her myth preserved far beyond the brittle fabrics and corroded metals that envelop her remains. Above ground, as the final lamps flicker out in dimming chapels and footsteps fall silent in the dusk, echoes of organ chords still vibrate along the stone pillars, weaving through the empty pews in a ghostly benediction. Below, the narrow corridors revert to absolute darkness, the only sound the distant drip of moisture and the faint hiss of air escaping through microscopic fissures in lead. It is a dual proclamation that no matter how radiant the golden age above may shine, every crown, every triumph, every life must ultimately yield to shadows. Yet even as vaults are sealed and candles extinguished, the spiritual legacy, the enduring tale of Elizabeth's reign will persist, carried forward by every page turned, every musical note played, every performance that summons her voice anew. Thus, with the last light fading above the abbey's nave and silence sinking into the crypt's depths, we are left with the profound lesson that no earthly glory is everlasting. But in the very act of remembering through art, literature, and memory, Elizabeth Regina lives on, immortal in the human imagination, a testament that while flesh returns to dust, the power of story transcends decay and outlasts the grave. After Dean Arthur Stanley's daring voyage into the abbey's hidden depths, Westminster Abbey revealed more than the memory of a single monarch. It unearthed an ancient enmity sealed in stone and lead. In that cramped, torchlit vault, two coffins lay side by side, separated by only a few inches of damp air. One contained Elizabeth Regina, the famed Virgin Queen, and the other held her cousin Mary, known to history as Maria Regina. More than 4 centuries earlier, Mary had presided over ruthless persecutions of over 280 Protestant dissenters, an era of terror that earned her the grim sobriquet, Bloody Mary. In stark contrast, Elizabeth had wielded power with a blend of pragmatism and mercy, navigating the turbulent waters between Catholic and Protestant factions to keep her realm intact. Under Stanley's flickering lamp, the scene seemed to pulse with irony. Mary's coffin was a modest affair, a simple lead shell, now mottled with rust, wrapped in tattered silk, that crumbled at Stanley's touch. The metal had aged into a patchwork of orange and brown, the original stamped letters barely discernible. Beside it, Elizabeth's jewel coffin, inner lead, outer oak, sumptuous crimson velvet, embroidered with Tudor roses, presented the remains of a funeral prepared with the utmost care and ceremony. Even in its dilapidated state, Elizabeth's drapery retained pockets of its former grandeur. Swaths of velvet, though torn and mould, blotched, still carried the intricate pattern of white and red roses mingled on the fabric. For centuries, those two women had confronted each other with lethal resolve. Mary, steadfast in her faith and merciless to those she deemed heretics. Elizabeth, determined to balance religious factions and preserve national unity. Now, in that stifling crypt, their physical legacies lay side by side, united at last in decay. The scent of cloves and cinnamon remnants of the embalming spices hung thick in the air, interwoven with the musty odour of stone and mould. It was as if the very atmosphere mourned both the tears shed under Mary's reign and the bloodless negotiations of Elizabeth's era, binding two dynastic souls in a shared fate. Stanley knelt before Mary's simple tomb, and gently traced a crack in the lead with his fingertip. It had split along a seam, fine as a spider's web, yet unmistakable. Through that narrow fissure, he heard a faint hiss, a whisper of stale air seeking escape, a soft lament from a body long silent. He wondered, for an instant, whether Mary had, in her final hours, pleaded for a peaceful interment like Elizabeth had. Perhaps she too had whispered a dying wish for her body to remain intact before God's judgment. Yet no record of such a plea survived beyond the vaulted hush of the crypt. Here lay the unspeakable irony. A queen famed for her mercy demanded none in life but desired compassion in death. And yet even her silent hopes were swallowed by history's indifference. The vaulted arches of the chamber seemed to amplify Stanley's solitude. Every flicker of his lamp cast dancing shadows on the damp walls, as though the crypt itself were attempting to relay some secret truth. In that dim light, the two coffins became monuments to time's impartial hand. The polished oak of Elizabeth's outer coffin had cracked, releasing splinters that lay scattered like brittle bones. The lead of Mary's had corroded and bubbled, its once solid surface now a fractured tapestry of oxidation. Beneath the abbey's venerable stone, secular grandiosity and pious terror converged in an unforgettable tableau. As Stanley rose, he placed a second candle on a ledge between the coffins, its flame warping in the chill draught. He offered a prayer not just for a single soul, but for both. For Mary's and for Elizabeth's. For the torment wrought in the name of faith and for the hard-won peace that followed. He asked in low Latin murmurs that these two cousins, once rivals on the political stage, might at last find reconciliation in the eternal stillness. The flame guttered, its light shrinking to a pinprick, and the cry of Stanley's own heartbeat seemed to echo in hollow chambers long untouched. Then, as silently as he had arrived, Stanley retreated. He backed away until the twin coffins receded into shadows, and finally, he closed the heavy door behind him. The lock clicked, sealing away the discord of two royal lives, joined by rivulets of blood and rivulets of oil. Above, the hum of tourists continued, punctuated by distant organ notes and murmured prayers. Below, the crypt returned to its silent vigil, a world apart from the sunlit aisles and vaulted ceilings. In the centuries since, the abbey's guardians have maintained that crypt with an uneasy reverence. They inspect the lead seams, reinforce the oak supports, and monitor humidity levels to forestall further collapse. Yet no amount of intervention can halt the slow advance of entropy within that sacred chamber. Day by day, the coffins continue their subterranean dialogue. A soft groan here, a clink of rusted nail there, a final testament that power and piety alike succumb to the silent laws of decay. And so, Westminster Abbey endures as a place of paradox, a magnificent shrine above, radiating faith and glory, and a realm of slow dissolution below, where two queens sleep in uneasy alliance. Their stories, one of violent repression, the other of cautious reconciliation, linger not only in the text of history, but in vaulted rock and twisted metal. Visitors passing by the ornate tombs may admire sculpted marble without ever glimpsing the dark truth beneath. Yet for those who dare descend, the crypt whispers its lesson, that every rivalry, every conquest, every reign, whatever grandeur it possessed, must share the same destiny in dust and shadow, where memory alone endures. Ascending back to the grand level of triumph and praise, the visitors once again surrendered to the solemn majesty of the abbey's nave. They drifted among polished marble floors and soaring columns, pausing to admire the alabaster effigies of conquering sovereigns, the proud form of Henry VIII, the stately pose of Queen Victoria, and the venerable memorials of poets such as Geoffrey Chaucer and William Shakespeare. Light poured through jewel-toned glass, scattering kaleidoscopic patterns across intricately carved stone. The deep resonance of the organ rose and fell in a gentle tide, carrying prayers and music into every corner of that vaulted expanse. It seemed impossible that beneath this serene splendor and the hushed footsteps of 1,000,000 annual pilgrims, countless royal tragedies lay buried, unheard and unseen beneath the floor's ornate mosaics. Yet rumors of the so-called exploding coffin and the Tudor stench had begun to circulate through the streets of London like an undercurrent of fear. Tavern patrons whispered of lead coffins swelling with toxic gases, of funeral barge crews forced to seal hastily the heavy hatch of the crypt entrance in terror. Those tales discouraged all but the most intrepid souls from venturing down a narrow stone staircase hidden behind a carved screen. Those who did step into that subterranean realm confronted an oppressive chill, damp walls mottled with moss, and a dense darkness that seemed to thicken with every cautious footfall. The drip of water sounded louder than church bells, and the stagnant breath of long-dead bodies felt almost tangible in that stifling air. Each echoing step reverberated like a tolling bell in a bygone era, beckoning would-be explorers to peer back into history, while also stirring the ancient dread of the unknown. Legend held that a handful of monastery guards tasked with the abbey's routines once dared to unlock the massive stone door leading to the crypt. They spoke of a faint, plaintive plea or gasp as the latch turned, an audible release of trapped air fused with the spicy hint of cloves. Terrified at that ghostly whisper and the unexpected perfume of embalming spices mingled with rot, the guards fled, slamming the door shut and vowing never to return. They told their colleagues that the very act of disturbing a royal tomb risked unleashing a living plague, turning a dignified procession of sorrow into a scene of biological horror. Their warnings spread, fostering a chilling respect for the iron-bound sanctity of the Queen's resting place. Even so, for historians and archaeologists, Westminster Abbey remained hallowed ground, an unparalleled repository of medieval life, medical practice and funerary ritual. Despite its terrors, the crypt represented a vital link to the past, offering insights into embalming techniques and ceremonial customs that shaped an era. Among those who prized such knowledge was Dean Arthur Stanley, who carefully collected fragments of mold-eaten velvet and brittle splinters of oak. He catalogued rust-eaten nails and tiny remnants of lead that had flaked from the coffin's interior lining. Each dusty fragment found its way into the halls of a leading museum, where modern scientists examined them with microscopes and chemical assays. The 21st century's medical experts compared these rudimentary embalming spices, clove, cinnamon, myrrh, to contemporary preservatives and antiseptics. They studied how the Tudor pallbearers, lacking the benefit of refrigeration or formaldehyde, harnessed the pungent qualities of exotic aromatics to slow decay. Each grain of residual myrrh clinging to fabric fibers testified to centuries-old ingenuity, a testament that, though imperfect, humanity had long sought to fight the inevitable march of decomposition. Above, visitors leafed through glossy guidebooks and traced the lines of monumental inscriptions without imagining the faint rustle of disintegrating fabric only a short distance below. They gazed in awe at the towering tombs, snapping photographs in the filtered sunlight, then pivoted, oblivious to the crypt's slow lament. But for those few attuned to the abbey's hidden symphony, every crumb of velvet, every flake of lead, every droplet splitting from a dripping stalactite contributed to a living tapestry of mortality. The ascent and descent of Westminster Abbey thus became more than a shift from light to dark. It evolved into a meditation on the dual nature of power and flesh. Above stood a testament to religious devotion, royal pageantry, and architectural triumph. Below roamed the relentless terror of biological decay, a reminder that beneath every crown and regal flourish lies the quiet inevitability of death. In that echo chamber, light and shadow engaged in a subtle duel. Up above, the daytime world reigned. Crowds exchanged polite commentary on chapel architecture and royal lineage, their footsteps echoing like soft percussion amid vaulted rafters. Down below, Dripping water composed a mournful lament, its measured plinks and plonks the crypt's own requiem. Above, the organ's swell lifted spirits and soothed weary hearts. Below, the mummy's secret breath pierced the silence, a melancholic counterpoint to celebratory chords. Above, the scent of incense and polished wood prevailed. Below, the sharp tang of embalming spices lingered, stubborn in the stale air, resisting oblivion. And so, in every corner of Westminster Abbey, the interplay of contrasts whispered its profound truth. That human grandeur, whether in verse, in stone, or in song, floats above a foundation of frailty. Each ornate tomb and resplendent chapel is anchored to the same substratum of dust and rot that carried Elizabeth's concealed gasp of decay. The Abbey's very design, its soaring ceilings and its concealed crypts, embodies the human paradox of aspiration and mortality, the desire to touch the divine while acknowledging that all returns to earth. Visitors who sense that paradox leave forever changed, carrying with them a quiet awe for both the luminous heights of human creativity and the silent depths of its ultimate surrender. Thus, the story of Westminster Abbey's great shrine becomes a tale of two realms, one of radiant ceremony, where voices join in prayer under sunlit stained glass, and one of whispered decay, where the slow crumble of velvet and wood speaks louder than any organ chord. In the duality of church and crypt, the Abbey offers a timeless lesson that glory and demise are inseparable, and that in the dance between light and darkness, between celebration and decay, we find the true measure of our fleeting yet remarkable existence. Departing the Abbey, visitors carried with them a sense of awe at the soaring Gothic architecture, every pointed arch and ribbed vault seeming to reach skyward in praise. Yet deep beneath that admiration lurked the shiver that had crept down their spines when they first descended into the crypt. Westminster Abbey thus became a place of duality. Above, a beacon of hope and reverence, awash in stained glass light and sacred hymns. Below, an ever-present nightmare of embalmed corpses, fetid gases, and the merciless ravages of time. On occasion, special guided tours admit only small parties, ushering them through subterranean corridors where damp stones still bear the patina of centuries. In these narrow passageways, moss clings stubbornly to mortar seams, and every footstep echoes like a heartbeat in the dark. Tour guides, often clad in muted tones, share intimate details of Tudor embalming practices, explaining how the lead coffins were engineered to withstand extreme internal pressure, thus averting the infamous Coffin explosion. They recount whispered legends of anguished moans that once reverberated through the blackness, a spectral lament trapped between brick and bone. Each measured step in this shadowed theatre feels like a cue in a macabre drama, where the past is not confined to dusty texts, but lives on in every clink of metal and every chill of damp air. Through the intertwined tales of Elizabeth and Mary, one glimpses the cruel intersection of religious war and dynastic ambition that pitted two women of the same bloodline against each other. Mary Tudor, Bloody Mary, had wielded persecution as her weapon, fueling sectarian flames that consumed hundreds of souls. Elizabeth I, by contrast, strove for a precarious balance between Catholic and Protestant factions, guiding the realm with tempered mercy. Yet here, in the Abbey's depths, their conflict dissolves into shared mortality. Neither stands victorious, only two decaying figures bound by unending solitude. It is a sorrowful testament to the final equality of death, where the grandest titles, the greatest wealth, and the most formidable power all vanish into dust. Contemporary poets and composers have drawn inspiration from this hidden world, creating works titled collectively Echoes Beneath the Abbey. Their songs and verses weave together the Abbey's twin themes of light and darkness, life and death, glory and decay. A haunting ballad for lute and voice captures the whispered sighs of cedarwood and carrion, as if the very walls were singing of lost sovereignty. A modern choral piece layers Gregorian chants with subtle electronic drones, evoking the interplay between ancient stone and the restless stirrings of unseen remains. Artists describe the sensation of empathy standing between vaulted splendor above and subterranean torment below, sparking profound reflections on the fragility of human existence. Listeners find themselves transported, their curiosity awakened, and their hearts stirred by the inevitable question, what remains when all else has fallen silent? In parallel, Modern medical researchers have turned to the Abbey's embalming artifacts as a living laboratory for historical biomedical investigation. Fragments of crimson velvet and flakes of residue from the lead coffins are subjected to chemical assays, revealing trace compounds of clove oil, cinnamon aldehyde, and myrrh resin used in the Tudor era. These analyses shed light on the origins of antiseptic and preservative science, long before formaldehyde's first synthesis. By comparing the molecular stability of these centuries-old remedies to those employed by ancient Egyptians and by medieval Arab physicians, scholars map the evolution of embalming techniques across cultures and epochs. Such knowledge helps contemporary conservators refine preservation protocols for organic tissues, while archaeologists gain deeper insight into ritual and practicality converging in royal funerary rites. Westminster Abbey thus transcends its role as merely a royal mausoleum. Above, it remains a jewel of ecclesiastical art and devotion, drawing pilgrims to kneel before the high altar and to gaze at the stone tracery that captures the sun like liquid colour. Below, it functions as a dynamic research site, an enduring chronicle of human attempts to defy nature's decree. Every sliver of mould-eaten linen, every warped lead ridge, every crumb of oak splintered by decay, contributes to an unfolding narrative of biology, theology, and history, inextricably intertwined. As dusk falls once more, the Abbey's exterior lights cast long shadows across the cloister gardens, while inside, the last tours shuffle down the steps, bravely facing the cold embrace of the crypt. Their lanterns bob in the gloom as they press on, guided by hushed commentary and the rhythmic drip of unseen water. Some clutch their sleeves as though warding off an unseen chill. Others whisper questions about what might stir beneath the flagstones. With each footfall, the Abbey's dual nature asserts itself anew. A sacred sanctuary above, a solemn testament to time's inexorable force below. And so, the legend of Westminster Abbey endures a layered tapestry of soaring faith and deep-rooted decay, where every hymn of praise coexists with the soft lament of the embalmed. In the very act of remembrance, the Abbey teaches that human grandeur and human frailty are never truly separate. They stand, always, in delicate balance, one breath away from light, one step away from darkness. In that recognition lies a profound comfort. Though all flesh must return to dust, the stories we tell, the songs we sing, and the research we conduct will echo beneath Abbey stone and in hearts alike, long after the candles have guttered out. Centuries have passed since Westminster Abbey first rose above the shores of the Thames, yet its hidden underbelly remains ever vulnerable to the slow march of decay. Through wars and reforms, revolutions and restorations, the Abbey has endured. Behind the scenes, however, museum staff and researchers work diligently to monitor the crypt's delicate balance. They measure humidity with precision instruments that record even the slightest uptick in moisture. They analyze gas concentrations to detect any sign of lethal emissions from the age-worn coffins. Should a crack appear in a lead seam or a panel of oak splinter under built-up pressure, they are ready to intervene. In recent years, they have implemented a network of microclimate sensors, tiny detectors affixed to stone and wood that transmit real-time data about temperature, humidity, and volatile organic compounds. This marriage of high-tech stewardship and medieval relic ensures that fragments of velvet and wood do not crumble before their stories are fully told. Professor Emily Hart of the University of London has often remarked on the Abbey's dual role as both a cradle of cultural memory and a laboratory of conservation science. Westminster Abbey exemplifies the intimate connection between heritage and preservation technology, she explains in her soft, contemplative voice. It is not enough to safeguard soaring arches and intricate statues. We must also monitor every scrap of dedicatory cloth and every grain of fallen mortar, for each bears witness to history. Research teams from across Europe consult the Abbey's archival data when planning to conserve royal crypts in Paris, Munich, or Rome. The protocols developed here, ranging from optimal pH levels in stone restoration to non-invasive analysis of textile remains, have become benchmarks for global heritage projects. In that sense, the Abbey's secret corridors serve as a crucible for conservation best practices, where the past is not only preserved, but also studied and understood in unprecedented detail. Yet beyond the realm of scientific inquiry, Westminster Abbey also holds deep spiritual resonance for many. Pilgrims of faith, particularly within the Anglican tradition, make their way to the Abbey not only to marvel at its grandeur, but to find solace in its sacred ground. In the candlelit stillness of chapels dedicated to the Virgin Queen, worshippers light tapers before her marble effigy. They offer prayers for justice, for peace, for guidance through life's storms. They speak softly of the Virgin Queen's protective presence, believing that Elizabeth's spirit may yet illuminate the path of the downtrodden. These devotional acts transform the abbey into a living sanctuary, where the line between mortal remains and eternal hope grows delightfully thin. Spiritual tourism, intertwined with heritage appreciation, has blossomed around the abbey's precincts. On select evenings, small group night tours wind their way through the cloister gardens and around the abbey's outer walls. Under a silvered moon, guides recount chilling tales. The apparition of a pale figure gliding down the crypt steps, the whispering of Mary's name in the stifled air, the resonance of faint footsteps trailing behind unwary explorers. Guests shiver as they imagine Tudor courtiers roaming in spectral form, or Elizabeth's ghost pacing beside her tomb in restless vigil. Despite the goosebumps these stories induce, curiosity prevails, and many participants leave breathless with wonder, compelled by the allure of uncovering secrets hidden in plain sight. Between fact and legend, Westminster Abbey has become the very soul of England. It is here that power, artistry, faith and science converge. Above, sunlight filters through iconic stained glass, painting the nave in hues of ruby and sapphire. Below, mold-eaten velvet and rusted lead bear silent testimony to human fragility. The drip of condensation in hidden vaults punctuates the echo of psalms offered at the high altar. Shakespeare's words resound in the pilgrimage guide's narrative as readily as they do on the globe stage, reminding visitors that art can outlive empires. Yet even the loftiest verse cannot stave off the slow crumble of fibre and stone. It is in this paradox between the resplendent and the decayed, the luminous pilgrimage and the dark descent, that the abbey's true magic resides. In every arch and every hollow, one perceives the tension between the shimmering present and the inscrutable past. The very stones know both the footfalls of kings and the soft tread of ghostly visitors. The brass inscriptions memorialize battles won and mercy granted, while the crypt shelters the mute resolve of bodies made fragile by time. Each element, be it a carved boss in the ceiling or a fragment of Tudor rose embroidery, carries a fragment of meaning, an echo of a life once lived. Scholars sift through archival records of Elizabeth's ambassadors, alongside chemical profiles of embalming oils, knitting together a tapestry of political acumen and scientific curiosity. Believers draw comfort from centuries of prayer, weaving their own hopes into the abbey's continuing litany. Poets and musicians, meanwhile, transform this confluence into verse and melody, channeling the abbey's dual spirits into their creations. Thus, Westminster Abbey's legacy endures not merely in stone and text, but in a living continuum of exploration, devotion, and artistic expression. A fabric scholar studies frayed threads beneath ultraviolet lights, while choir boys practice anthems overhead. A conservator adjusts a dehumidifier as tourists gaze in wonder at soaring arches. A pilgrim kneels in silent reflection before Elizabeth's tomb, feeling the weight of history and the lightness of faith in a single heartbeat. And somewhere between the lofty organ loft and the ossuary below, the abbey whispers its stories to any who will listen, that splendor and decay are forever entwined, that human ambition and divine mystery dance together across the ages, and that even as lead softens and velvet disintegrates, the human spirit can rise timeless, carried on the wings of memory and wonder. In the end, the message emerges with gentle clarity. Though Elizabeth I and Mary, I once battled fiercely fighting not only for faith, but for the very seat of power, both found themselves powerless before life's immutable course of birth, aging, illness, and death. Westminster Abbey, with its soaring Gothic vaults above and its damp, echoing crypts below, stands as an emblem of two intertwined realms, the fleeting brilliance of triumph and the endless permanence of mortality. Above, pilgrims wander through aisles bathed in kaleidoscopic light, their eyes lifted toward ribbed ceilings and stained glass windows that depict saints and martyrs in vivid hues. The organ's solemn chords rise and fall, weaving a tapestry of sound that seems to draw the heavens near. The atmosphere hums with sacred reverence, as though every note might drive back the shadow of doubt. But all it takes is a single, tentative step down the narrow stone stairway to shatter the illusion. There, in the crypt's murk, The heavy scent of mould mingles with the faint tang of thousand-year-old spice. Fragments of Tudor rose embroidery lie scattered like autumn petals gone to dust. Lead plates, once hammered smooth, buckle into grotesque folds. Walls slick with moisture bear the weight of centuries, dripping cold reminders that no castle of stone can keep decay at bay. This stark descent transforms the abbey from a beacon of hope into a vault of whispered horrors. The contrast is surreal. Above, every surface gleams with polished marble and gilt. Below, every surface is pocked with corrosion and loss. Yet it is precisely in this duality that the abbey's power resides. It teaches us that beauty itself is transient, that every triumph must yield to the slow, indifferent work of time. Splendor, no matter how dazzling, will fade. Only memory and the lessons we draw from it may endure. Within each visitor's heart, this journey plants a seed of profound questioning. What shall we leave behind? As tendrils of imagination drift between candlelit chapels and shadowed vaults, one cannot help but ponder the legacy of a single life. The brittle scraps of fabric, once resplendent as royal banners, now teach a humble truth. No mortal can conquer the grave. Yet the very act of preserving those fragments, of studying their weave and the spices that filled their folds, reveals our capacity to transcend brute endings. In abbey laboratories, scientists blend modern techniques with ancient wisdom, extracting molecular clues from myrrh and cinnamon to illuminate early embalming. Their findings do more than safeguard history. They underscore humanity's enduring quest to understand and to honor the living and the dead. Elizabeth Regina, though her body lies entombed in fragments of wood and lead, lives on in pages and portraits, in plays and films. Every dusty manuscript, every flickering performance, keeps her spirit luminous. Historians recount her deft diplomacy and her naval triumphs. Novelists embed her in tales of intrigue. Filmmakers restore her visage in sumptuous costume dramas. Through these cultural echoes, Elizabeth's name survives as a symbol of steadfast rule and indomitable intelligence, a testament to what one individual can shape before returning to dust. And when at last the last candle gutterers out in the abbey's quiet chapels, the only sound that remains is the distant tolling of the hour, bell low, resonant, carrying through both nave and crypt. Its peal knits together the worlds above and below, a sonic bridge between triumph and ruin, between hymn and hush. In that moment, the abbey invites each of us to contemplate a simple yet profound truth. Power will crumble, beauty will fade, flesh will turn to dust. But the spirit carried forward in story, in song, and in scholarship remains immortal. Thus, from the polished slabs of Henry's tomb to the silent decay of Elizabeth's mummy, Westminster Abbey stands as a living paradox. It is a monument to fleeting glory and timeless reflection. It whispers that although we cannot outrun the darkness of death, we can kindle a candle of remembrance that forever pushes back the night. In that gentle glow, the lessons of the past illuminate the paths of the future, ensuring that while all bodies may break, our collective memory and the wisdom it holds will never perish. Over the course of centuries, Westminster Abbey has borne witness not only to the grand funeral of Elizabeth I, but also to the meticulous, ongoing work of damage control upon its ancient fabric. Stains of rising damp, hairline cracks branching across stone walls, and moisture seeping through hidden fissures. By the 20th century, the Abbey's custodians had begun to marry tradition with cutting-edge science. They installed humidity sensors in the vaults, deployed tiny endoscopic cameras into narrow crawl spaces, and conducted three-dimensional laser scans of every nook and cranny. Desiccant pumps were fitted to draw excess moisture from the air. Fragile fragments of Tudor velvet were coated with protective polymers, and antimicrobial mists were periodically diffused to inhibit the growth of mold and bacteria that would otherwise feast on the precious textiles and corrode centuries-old metal. Monthly analyses of environmental data enabled conservators to detect anomalies early, such as a dangerous buildup of noxious gases that might warp a lead coffin lining, so that preventive measures could be taken before irreparable damage occurred. Yet, alongside this scientific vigilance, the Abbey has preserved its sacred character. Every year on the 24th of March, the anniversary of Elizabeth's passing, a special service is held in the lofty main chapel. Scholars, clergy, and lay faithful gather under the soaring Gothic arches, candlelight dancing upon carved capitals and stained glass windows. The congregation lights taper candles and fills the nave with the rich harmonies of well-rehearsed hymns. A hush falls at the moment of remembrance as the community pauses before the immaculate white marble tomb inscribed Elizabeth Regina. It is a ritual of living memory, reminding all present that even though her body has long since decayed, her name and spirit endure in the hearts and minds of generations who revere her legacy. For those drawn to exploration and esoteric lore, the Abbey now offers what it calls the Echoes of the Crypt Tour, an intimate experience reserved for small groups. Participants are issued headlamps and wireless earpieces through which their guide describes, in a hushed tone, every chamber and recess they pass. They learn of medieval medical practices, the gruesome realities of embalming in Tudor England, and the extraordinary engineering behind exploding coffin prevention. As the group descends into the dim corridors, the scent of damp stone and ancient wood envelops them. The wind, funneled through narrow breaks in the masonry, whistles softly, and the headlamps illuminate jagged edges of fabric still bearing the once vibrant Tudor rose motif. Visitors hear how, on rare occasions, the odour of putrefaction became so intense that guides had to seal the crypt door in panic. These tales, conveyed in the very sepulchral environment where they occurred, render the past palpably alive and chilling. It is precisely this blending of scientific preservation, spiritual ritual, and immersive tourism that has reshaped Westminster Abbey into much more than a must-see landmark. Today, it functions as a living museum of the human psyche, a place where power and mortality converge, where history and the present moment meld in stone and spirit. Above, the Abbey's soaring vaults and luminous glass continue to inspire awe. Below, its shadowed vaults and weathered relics provoke humility. Researchers delve into chemical analyses of myrrh residues, archivists pore over faded documents, and prayerful worshippers whisper petitions in candlelit side chapels. At the same time, curious travellers steel themselves for that first step down the shadowed stair, ready to feel the weight of centuries upon their backs. Through this alchemy of disciplines, heritage science, liturgical observance, and experiential exploration, Westminster Abbey has become a beacon for all who seek to understand both the grandeur of human achievement and the sobering truth of our impermanence. It stands as a testament that, while we may erect monuments of stone and echo our voices in hallowed halls, the most profound legacy is not in the permanence of marble, but in the living interplay of knowledge, faith, and memory that endures beyond the dust of ages. If the lofty nave of Westminster Abbey evokes solemn awe, then its hidden crypt plunges visitors into primal fear. Over the years, countless writers and artists have drawn inspiration from that subterranean realm, weaving its chilling atmosphere into historical novels, stage plays, and short films. In Samantha Hughes's acclaimed novella Whispers in Stone, the author portrays Queen Elizabeth I returning in a fever dream to haunt her own tomb. The narrative follows an unsuspecting descendant who stumbles upon a Tudor embalming journal in an old manor house. As the dreamer reads each page, the Abbey's shadowed corridors come alive. The metallic click of steel needles piercing flesh, the rasp of the embalmer's blade through cold tissue, and the soft hiss of scented oils igniting on the damp stone. Through this surreal journey, Hughes unravels the intertwined threads of ambition and mortality, revealing how power's legacy can both illuminate history and cast the longest shadows. On stage at the Royal Theatre, a concert hall a stone's throw from the Abbey, the musical drama The Virgin Queen combines Baroque orchestration with a modern chorus to conjure both grandeur and dread. Projections of the Abbey's painted glass and ribbed vaults sweep across the back wall, while CGI animations transport the audience down into the crypt. At key moments, the lights flicker as ghostly harpsichord chords mix with the drawn breath of the protagonist, a virtual Baroque diva lamenting the fate of her coffin. Ragged curtains of CGI velvet swirl on screen as actresses in Tudor gown and ruff enact the embalming ritual under a single wavering lantern. The music, at once opulent and unsettling, underscores the fragile line between reverent ceremony and the clinical precision needed to guard against the coffin bomb of trapped gases. Beyond the world of theatre, Westminster Abbey has become an indispensable subject for documentary filmmakers. BBC's Secrets of the Royal Crypt and National Geographic's Ghosts of the Abbey both feature high-definition close-ups of decayed crimson fabric and rusted iron fixtures. Endoscopic cameras slip behind the lead coffin's lining to reveal the warped metal and brittle oak within. Specialists in medieval medicine describe the Tudor embalming process, painstakingly comparing it to the ancient Egyptian practice of natron desiccation and the Roman method of salt curing. Viewers learn how Tudor apothecaries leveraged imported spices clove, cinnamon, myrrh to create a makeshift preservative bath. Far from an act of homage, the procedure emerges as a pragmatic solution to a horrifying threat. Without it, the Queen's corpse might have ruptured in spectacular and possibly hazardous fashion during her state funeral. These explorations, whether fictional or factual, have elevated the Abbey into something more than a mausoleum or a cultural landmark. It has become for many a temple to the intersection of history, science, and popular culture. In the summer months, visitors can gather on the forecourt's grass for open-air screenings of the latest Abbey films. A giant screen relays live footage from high-resolution cameras in the crypt, showing rusted nails and mouldy velvet as scholars debate preservation challenges in real time. Panel discussions follow, featuring directors who have dramatized the Abbey's lore, historians who decipher its medieval charters, and conservation scientists who explain the cutting-edge techniques keeping lead and linen from literal collapse. From these many vantage points, page, stage, screen, and lecture hall, Westminster Abbey's hidden depths become a crucible of human curiosity. The same stone that supports a soaring spire also cradles the whispers of generations. The same stained glass that bathes worshippers in kaleidoscopic light casts shifting patterns across the damp crypt floor. The Abbey thus stands as a living testament to our unending fascination with the verge between life and death, faith and science. It is a place where historical drama and empirical research dance in uneasy partnership, reminding us that even the grandest rituals may mask a pragmatic struggle against nature's indifference. In that duality, the Abbey invites us to ponder our own fragile tenure on earth. We marvel at the vaulted ceilings, the golden candlesticks, the soaring psalms, and then we shiver at the thought of the Queen's own embalmed remains, swaddled in spiced linens beneath our feet. We learn that sometimes preservation is not an act of remembrance, but a lifeline cast against oblivion's pull. We see art that dramatizes the crypt's horrors and science that documents them in stunning clarity. Above and below merge into a single continuum, blurring the line between reverent pilgrimage and anthropological expedition. At the end of the day, when the outdoor projector dims, the last cots of crumpled velvet are packed away, and the echoes of scholarly debate fade into the evening breeze. Westminster Abbey remains a beacon of paradox. It is both a sanctuary for prayer and a laboratory for inquiry, both a stage for spectacle and a shrine for secrets. Its crypt and its nave reflect the human spirit's twin quests: to build monuments that reach for the divine, and to confront the dark realities that dwell beneath beauty's veneer. And as night descends, the Abbey's walls seem to sway between two moods. One moment, the soaring arches above pulse with residual incandescence. The next, the crypt's inarticulate sighs seem to pulse back. In that fragile flicker, a sleepy hush invites us to dream and perhaps to awaken to the truth that monarchy and mortality, faith and science, splendor and decay are forever entwined. It is here, in this uneasy harmony, that the echoes of history resonate most profoundly, beckoning us to remember that in preserving the past, we preserve ourselves. As our journey through the silent corridors and sunlit aisles of Westminster Abbey draws to a close, today's video offers more than a mere tour of stone and shadow. It invites you to carry forward 3 profound gifts into your own life: the humility born of confronting mortality, the inspiration found in history's resilience, and the reminder that our legacies rely not on grandeur, but on meaningful action. First, the video's immersive descent into the Abbey's crypts gently awakens us to the inevitability of death, a humbling truth often pushed aside in daily bustle. Watching the lead coffins bulge, the velvet fray, and the walls weep moisture, we are reminded that every life, no matter how powerful, is subject to time's impartial sweep. Yet this realization need not cast a lingering shadow over our days. Instead, it can free us from trivial anxieties. By acknowledging our shared fate, we gain perspective. The late-night worries and petty frustrations lose their weight when measured against the boundless scale of history. In confronting mortality so directly, we become more present to life, more appreciative of the sunrise, more mindful in conversation, more daring in pursuit of purpose. Second, interwoven with that humility, is a powerful testament to human resilience and creativity. The video showed Abbey conservators using cutting-edge technology, humidity sensors, three-dimensional scans, antiseptic mists to rescue precious fragments of Tudor heritage. We witnessed scientists analyzing centuries-old spices to unlock ancient preservation secrets. This blending of old and new reminds us that progress often emerges from bridging past wisdom with modern innovation. In your own life, you might draw inspiration to revisit time-tested traditions, be it a family recipe, a craft, or a ritual, and fuse them with contemporary tools. Perhaps you revive a handwritten letter to accompany an email, or you reimagine an heirloom garment with sustainable fabrics. Just as the Abbey's guardians wove Tudor velvet and 21st century science into a single tapestry, you too can honor heritage while embracing the new. Third, the video underscores the enduring power of story. From Samantha Hughes's fevered dreams in Whispers in Stone to the soaring choruses of the Virgin Queen stage adaptation, we saw how art channels history's echoes into our hearts. These narratives remind us that the most lasting legacies are those we craft through words, music, and shared experience. In a world of fleeting headlines and digital ephemera, there is great value in telling stories that matter, whether you compose a poem, record an oral history, or simply share a treasured memory with a friend. Your stories can animate the past and illuminate the present, creating threads of connection that outlive any single lifetime. Taken together, these themes form the video's core message. True immortality lies not in marble monuments or lead-sealed tombs, but in the humility to accept our end, the ingenuity to preserve what we cherish, and the courage to tell our stories. This triad is universally applicable. In the modern workplace, it can translate into compassionate leadership, acknowledging one's own limitations, fostering collaboration between seasoned expertise and fresh perspectives, and communicating a compelling vision that unites colleagues. In personal relationships, it means cherishing moments over milestones, blending family traditions with new experiences, and sharing narratives that strengthen bonds across generations. Finally, today's video encourages a mindset of stewardship, caring not only for physical heritage, but also for the intangible legacies we inherit and shape. Just as Abbey conservators monitor each gram of leaking lead and each flake of mouldy velvet, we can attend to the small details of our own legacies. A kind word to a stranger, a mentoring gesture to a newcomer, a sustainable choice to protect our planet's future. These everyday acts, though seemingly modest, accumulate into a lasting testament to compassion, creativity, and consciousness. When you leave this video behind, whether on your screen or in your memory, I hope you carry its lessons forward. Embrace life's fragility to live more fully. Marry tradition with innovation to spark progress, and weave your own stories to enrich those who follow. In doing so, you honor the centuries-old Abbey's silent whispers and ensure that your own echo will be heard long after your candles burn out.